My name is Mark Stevenson. I'm President and CEO of Capital Pacific Bank, which, as Karen mentioned, is going to soon be part of Pacific Continental Bank. Together, we're going to be a $1.7 billion community bank serving Northwest businesses and over 1,300 nonprofit organizations located from Eugene to Seattle and Portland. Consistent with the principles of our B Corporation status, our growth and success has been a result of how we equally value and invest in our community, our clients, and our staff, which translates into rewarding our shareholders. I'm looking forward to listening to our speaker today, Hildy Gottlieb, as we are very much identify with her philosophy of being able to make a difference and create real social change by asking questions, seeing the connections, listening to our clients and their issues, and figuring out how to get things done from the viewpoint of abundance, not scarcity. With that, we are pleased to be a sponsor of WVDO's Winter Conference this week and to help bring our speaker today, Hildy Gottlieb, to Portland. Hildy is a social scientist and asker of powerful questions. She is the co-founder of Creating the Future, a living laboratory for accomplishing social change. Her work is about bringing out the best in individuals, organizations, and our world through the questions we ask in our day-to-day lives. Hildy is also a published author, a TEDx speaker, a contributor to the Huffington Post, and the creator and host of the Making Change podcast in partnership with the Chronicle of Philanthropy. She has spent time in all three sectors: government, business, and the community benefit nonprofit sector. She also co-founded the world's first diaper bank, which sparked a diaper banking movement across the company and earned a Points of Light citation from President Clinton. Her topic for today's Friday Forum is Change the Questions, Change the World. How can the questions we ask in our day-to-day work significantly enhance the quality of life in our communities? She'll share what she and her team at Creating the Future have learned in over 15 years of research and experimentation into the factors that create social change. So please welcome Hildy Gottlieb.
Good afternoon. How's everybody doing? Excellent, excellent. Quick question for you guys. Are any of you fans of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? Yay, okay. Fans of The Hitchhiker's Guide know that they have found the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything. And the answer is 42. Problem is they don't know what the question is. Welcome to the heart of what I want to share with you guys today, because my life is all about asking powerful questions, because the questions we ask can change absolutely everything. The work that we're doing at Creating the Future began about 15 years ago, and it was really rooted in hearing frustration no matter where we went. We heard frustration from folks in the community benefit sector. We heard real frustration for folks in the business world. We heard frustration for folks in the government sector, that we were working so hard to create change. And yet what we were seeing was ongoing struggle, ongoing pain, ongoing suffering, and sometimes it felt like things were actually getting worse. So in response to that, Creating the Future is, now 15 years later, a living laboratory really focused on that question of, we all sense what is possible. We see sweeping change happen. We see a civil rights movement. We see a South African freedom movement. We see an Indian independence movement. We see that change is possible. What drove us was the question of, what is going on when those huge leaps forward happen? And then how can we incorporate that stuff into the day-to-day work that we all do? It doesn't matter, nonprofit, for-profit. If we could incorporate those principles into the work we all do, then imagine the change that we could all be creating. And so we did a lot of research, a lot of experimenting. We're still experimenting. It is a living laboratory. But our research were in the fields of history and sociology, looking back over time to say, okay, what has created sweeping change over time? But we also looked at fields like behavioral psychology and neuroscience, because sweeping change of history is about people, and we wanted to know what is happening in people when we make dramatic leaps forward. We found a really interesting thing. We all know that change does happen, but we somehow have convinced ourselves that change happens when magical people do magical things. So we think of the civil rights movement, which was millions of people, but we think of Martin Luther King. We think of the Indian independence movement, which was millions of people, but we think of Mahatma Gandhi. How many of you guys think you could actually be Nelson Mandela? Right? Okay, so we think of these people as magical. We think of them as gods. And what we found in our research and in our work is that no, of course they're not magical and they're not gods. What they're doing is they were asking different questions and taking their actions based on those different questions. When we change the questions we ask, it changes everything. In our day-to-day lives, though, we are driven to find the answers. And so frequently we find an answer that makes about as much sense as 42 when you take it out of context. The power comes in changing the questions that we ask. And when we do that, what we find is it levels the playing field. We no longer have to depend on specific individuals who have specific talents because we all have the talent to ask these different questions. So what is it about questions? Why questions? One of the first things that we realized, which is not going to seem like anything earth-shattering to you guys, is that life is nothing but cause and effect. Okay? What we have today is a result of what happened yesterday. What's going to be tomorrow is a result of today. Everything in our lives is cause and effect. If I yell at my kid in the morning, there's a good chance I'm going to have a really bad day. There's a good chance she's going to have a really bad day, and that's going to ripple, and everybody else around us is going to have a bad day, because life is just cause and effect. So the results that we get in our work are a result of our actions. Pretty much, duh, okay. But the results that our actions come from our assumptions. Our assumptions and our beliefs are the things that create our actions. So the result that we get, the cause and effect, the result that we get is actually a direct result through those actions of the assumptions and beliefs that we carry with us. Our assumptions are nothing more than the stories we tell ourselves that we believe as truth. So if I believe that the world is flat or the world is round, those are stories I'm telling myself. Dark-skinned people are better than light-skinned people. Light-skinned people are better than dark-skinned people. It's stupid to measure people by the color of their skin. Those are stories that we are telling ourselves. Each of those is a story that will guide our actions, that will guide our results. What's interesting about those stories, though, is that they're actually the answers to questions we don't even realize we're asking. So the question about the world being flat or being round is, what's out there? And will I die if I go out that far? Because I can't see. The question about color of skin is about, should I trust that person? Are they like me? Am I better than them? We are asking questions we don't even realize that we're asking. We're answering them, and those become the stories that we base all of our actions on. So then what are the questions that actually bring out the best in us? Those questions we found are two. When humanity takes huge leaps forward, and we've seen that. We've seen humanity do huge leaps. Two kinds of questions are guiding that. The first are questions that create what is possible rather than reacting to what is wrong. When humanity makes huge leaps forward, we are asking and answering questions that create what is possible rather than reacting to what is wrong. The other types of questions that make those huge leaps are when we assume the best in each other rather than suspecting the worst in each other. The questions that bring out the best in each other rather than suspecting the worst in each other. And so today I'm going to share with you 3 questions that you can take back to your day-to-day work, whether you are the CEO of a major corporation, the CEO of your family, the CEO of your dog. Bring these questions back, because what we find is that if we change the questions that we ask, that changes absolutely everything. I'm going to start with the questions about end results. And that very, very first question about end results is, what do we want life to be like? What do we want life to be like? I mentioned that the assumptions that bring us huge leaps forward are when we create what is possible versus reacting to what is wrong. What do we want life to be like? If we look at things like space travel and cell phones, those were not a reaction to what was wrong. That was creating what was possible. When we think about somebody like Martin Luther King didn't say, we have a really bad problem. He said, I have a dream. And that dream galvanized millions of people to create what was possible. One of the people that is frequently brought up in these contexts is Steve Jobs and Apple in the business world. Apple is all about reaching for what we want life to be like. I find that's probably the biggest difference between Apple and Microsoft. When we think of Microsoft, we're not thinking about envisioning a life we never had. I mean, how many of you guys stood in line and camped out overnight for the latest version of Windows 8? Okay? We would camp out for the next iPhone even if everybody said it sucked. Because it's all about what life could be like. It's not about fixing something. But what are the questions that we actually really ask in our day-to-day? Those questions sort of sound something like this. What are our customers' needs, and how will we supply those needs? What is the pain our product solves? That marketing question. We're looking for the pain point. What are the issues facing our community, and how will we address them? What are the root causes of the problems in our community, and how will we finally stop them? What is the data telling us, and what can we do to improve? These are all questions that are reacting to what the current circumstance is. So when we think about reacting, we go, well, you know, the work that I'm doing isn't really reactive. We're doing prevention work, and we sort of honor doing prevention work. Prevention work is actually reacting to what's wrong today by preventing it so it will hopefully never happen again. We get excited about being proactive, but proactive is actually just getting ahead of the problem. We're very proud of our work when it's data-driven. Well, data is always about the past, because I don't have much data about the future. Data is always about the past, so all we can do is react to that data. But we don't call it reacting, we call it being responsive. We're responsive to our customers' needs. But responsive is just another nice word for reacting. So what we're actually doing in our day-to-day lives most of the time is reacting rather than creating. Here's why that's powerful. I mentioned that we did a lot of study into neuroscience. What happens when we are in reactive mode, none of us are particularly nice. What reactive mode does is it triggers all of those brain chemicals that are just the same as the fight and flight chemicals. They're all of the fear and scarcity chemicals that happen when I'm in reactive mode, and oh my God, what am I going to say because you said that? That's what reactive mode does to us. We're always trying to be out in front of it so that we don't get caught up in it. If you have been frustrated in the work that you are doing to create change, I will share with you that part of the reason for that is all of the systems we currently work with in our day-to-day are rooted in reacting to what's wrong rather than creating what is possible. Picture the meetings that you find yourselves in all the time. We love visionaries. We love people like Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela. We love them for posters and quotes on the wall. We love them. We do not like them in our staff meetings. We don't, right? I mean, what do we say to them? We say, get real. Get real, okay? Oh my God, him again. He's always so blue sky. He's such a Pollyanna. I mean, I named my book The Pollyanna Principles because I figured if people were going to call me that, I might as well step right in and claim it. But that's what we do. We have names for people who are visionaries in our day-to-day because they're sort of a pain. And those are the systems that we've created. That whole get real mentality. And so if you are feeling frustration, what you're sensing is a disconnect between the fact that we have somehow defined societally that get real is be reactive. But the truth is, getting real never created the sweeping change that we have seen, that we know is possible, that we sense is possible. When humanity makes huge leaps forward, it is not because we're getting real. It's because we're creating what is possible. Find my good questions now. So what do those good questions look like then? So if we're talking about our customers, this is obviously the Apple question. What do we want our customers' lives to be like? And what would it take to create that? What do we want our employees' lives to be like? And what would it take to accomplish that? What do we want our community to look like? And what would it take for our community to be that? I mentioned that it's hard for us to think that we could be Nelson Mandela or Martin Luther King, but let me share with you somebody that will make it feel more possible. And that is one of our fellows at Creating the Future, Nancy. Nancy is a middle-aged woman like me. She was born and raised in Iowa. She's got that Midwest nice. She's just a normal person. Nancy sits on her school board. Do any of you guys sit on a school board? Okay, then you have my blessing. You know that school boards are like where patience goes to die. You know, I mean, there's actually, a little known fact, if you're on a school board, you actually go straight to heaven. You can do whatever you want, go right up to heaven. You know, school boards are scary places. We're talking about money, we're talking about scarcity. They are really down to it sort of places. And Nancy sits on the school board in her small community. And the school board was talking about what they always talk about. School boards talk about money. And it was one of those conversations that was just spiraling, and people arguing about what should we do, and what should we do, and what should we... And Nancy, just after about 15 minutes, she said, what does this conversation have to do with our creating a community where kids are thriving? We've said that's our vision. What does this conversation have to do? It's the what do we want life to be like question. And she said, it changed everything. They went, oh, yeah. And it created context for that financial conversation that they had to have. Rather than reacting to it, it was, oh, this is what we want to create. This is what it would look like on the way to that. We can all do that in our day-to-day lives. Change one question and change everything. What's been interesting is our fellows at Creating the Future, and there's about 100 fellows around the world. Our fellows are people who have basically committed to learning, ongoing sharing, ongoing practice in this field of bringing out the best in each other through the questions we ask. And what our fellows find consistently is when they ask that question of what do we want life to be like, no matter how much conflict was in a room, once we can get the conversation around what we want life to be like, we all agree. They've seen situations that have been in conflict for 20 years, and within an hour, by asking that one question of what do we want life to be like? Because we all want life to be healthy and humane and compassionate. There's very few people who don't want that. And we all know who they are, and we try and stay away from them. So that real powerful question of what do we want life to be like is that question about end results, that when sweeping change has happened, that has been guiding it. So now let's talk about the means to the ends. And the first means, I said there's going to be 3 questions. The second one is who else cares about this? Who else cares about this? If life is just cause and effect starts with our assumptions, that means it starts with the people. It starts with the people. When things go wrong, it's never about the thing, it's always about the people in the room. And so who else cares about this? Social movements we have seen are all about that question of who else cares about this and how can we bring out the best in them. I mean, if we think about social movements like the Civil Rights Movement, like the South African Freedom Movement, those were movements that brought out the best of people who had systematically had their best taken away from them. And yet the success of those movements were entirely because it brought out the best in people. When we think about business legends, we think about Costco, we think about Netflix, we think about Patagonia, these names that we're always hearing in business about bringing out the best in people. Costco, if I asked you guys, what is Costco known for? Aside from lots and lots of stuff that you didn't need. Costco is known for paying their people really well. And when sweeping change happens, it happens because we bring out the best in each other. Interestingly, Henry Ford was known for the same thing. 100 years ago, Henry Ford, they had massive problems with turnover in the auto industry, and Henry Ford did the unthinkable. He doubled the day rate. Now, he doubled it from $2.50 a day to $5 a day, but he doubled the day rate that they paid. Just like Costco found that if you bring out the best in people, you get more out of them. Netflix is known for giving unlimited vacation time. Take as much vacation time as you want. Patagonia, you not only make your own work hours, but that means determining how many of those hours you work. It's about bringing out the best in each other rather than suspecting the worst in each other. When I talk to people about this, it's really interesting. People will frequently tell me, you know, we're pretty good to our employees. We're really good. We have a pretty good customer policy. We like to think that we're really good people. So I'll ask you guys, do you pay your staff above the going rate? Do you give them unlimited vacation time? Do you let them set their hours? Your salaried staff determine if they worked 2 hours a week and got everything done, would that be okay? Are we bringing out the best in people, or are we suspecting the worst in them and creating lots of rules and lots of policies to make sure they do or don't do what we suspect they might do? That's more the norm. If you guys work for the government, do you see your job as catalyzing the leadership in your community? Or do you see your job as making rules and enforcing them and making sure that people don't cheat? One of the favorite places that I like to fantasize about bringing out the best in people is the prison system. And this is particularly important in this country because this country imprisons more human beings than any other country in the world. And that's not per capita. We have more people behind bars than any other country in the world. Can you imagine if the prison system was rooted in bringing out the best in people who happened to be there because at one point in their life they were at their worst? And that's when people sort of go, oh, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. You know, those people sort of deserve to be there. They did bad stuff and they deserve to be there. And, you know, I come from Arizona. I come from Tucson, not Phoenix, but Phoenix is the land of Sheriff Joe Arpaio, who, if you have watched on TV, is, quote, America's toughest sheriff. He puts prisoners in pink underwear to humiliate them. He has them in chain gangs out in the 120-degree Phoenix heat because they deserve it. Well, you know, there's days I'm not at my best. And I'm going to guess that at least one or two of you are having that day right now where we're not at our best. And wouldn't it be wonderful if we had somebody whose job it was to bring out our best when we're not at our best? And so I just imagine if you looked at all of the people that we have behind bars right now, imagine if the prison system was all about bringing out the best in those people rather than suspecting and punishing for the worst in them. Our day-to-day is rooted in suspecting the worst in each other. And so again, if you're frustrated in the work you're doing, the systems we are taught to use is rooted in that fear and bringing out, in suspecting the worst in each other, even when we know cognitively that it's not true. It's real interesting. That's a point of cognitive dissonance that we frequently face. When I talk about Netflix and I talk about Patagonia, people will frequently tell me, yeah, but they're just going to take all that vacation time. They're never going to work. We're never going to get stuff done. I hear this a lot in the nonprofit world. Well, we can't do that. We don't have funding for that. We can't just let people take whenever they want. They're going to take everything. Do you know what the reality is? Netflix and Patagonia, the real problem they have? They can't get people to take time off. People won't take their vacation time. Patagonia actually has to lock the doors of their corporate headquarters on the weekends because their employees will come in and they don't want them to. That's that cognitive dissonance. We suspect the worst in each other even when the facts are directly against that. How many of you guys have spent an entire day chasing down somebody because you found their wallet? Right? But if I lost my wallet, I'd say, oh, it's gone. It's gone. They're going to take everything out of it. I'll never see it again. They've been doing psychology studies about lost wallets for about 100 years, right? And it proves exactly that if you lose a wallet, they will almost always, invariably, huge percentage be returned with every dollar intact, and yet, you know, I'm the good person. I'd return it, but probably not you. And that's what we suspect. We have built all of our systems around suspecting the worst in each other. So who else cares about this is a question we can ask. What can we accomplish together that we can't accomplish on our own? What can we do to bring out the best in each other? Let me share a story with you from the business world, because if we're going to suspect the worst in each other, of course we're going to suspect in the business world, because if I share my idea with you, you're going to take it. And that's what we believe. Again, it's one of those stories we tell ourselves. If I share with you in the business world, that's why we're competition. I can't tell my competition what I'm doing. And this is the story of Amy's Kitchen. Any of you guys familiar with Amy's Kitchen, Amy's Foods? Fabulous vegetarian foods, frozen, and I wish Amy's would pay me in soup. I mean, they're wonderful, wonderful. Story of Amy's is the same story of every tiny little startup that ever started. Their baby was little. They wanted to feed her good frozen foods. That's, by the way, who Amy is. Wanted to feed Amy good foods. They didn't find any out there. They said, you know what, we're good cooks. I mean, this is where any small business comes from. They didn't know anything about production. They didn't know anything about how you freeze the stuff. They didn't know how you get it from one coast to the other. And so they picked up the phone and did the unthinkable. They called Swanson's Foods. Swanson's, the big behemoth. You know, I grew up on their TV dinners. They called Swanson's Foods. And they said, you know, can you tell us how you do this? And Swanson said, sure, come on down. And their engineers took them through their factories, and they showed them, here's the machinery we use, here's the equipment we use, here's the process we use. Call us if you've got any questions. Neither company went out of business. Both of them are still thriving. What can we accomplish together? Who else cares about this? We don't have to suspect the worst in each other. We can bring out the best in each other. We can do this in our meetings. You can do this day to day right now. We don't have to have those horrible staff meetings. We can start meetings by getting to know each other, because again, it's always about the people. It's never about the thing. Things fall apart. It's always about the people. And it's always because we don't have a chance to get to know each other. One of our fellows worked with a hospital CEO who started every staff meeting with the question, what evidence have you seen this week of our values in action? What evidence have you seen this week of our values in action? And everyone got to share what they had experienced that excited them that week. How can we get to know each other? How can we bring out the best in each other? At Creating the Future, one of the things you'll find, and some of you may know this, but all of our meetings are streamed live online. We have open board meetings, strategy meetings, our resource development meetings. We're in the middle of web strategy right now. All of our strategy meetings and all of our board meetings you can watch online. And we ask for people to participate via Twitter. You don't have to know us. I mean, we've had great people that we never heard of that were interested in the topic and came into the room. Why? Because we want to know who else cares about this. But one of the things that you'll find in our board meetings and in our strategy meetings, we start every meeting by asking, what has happened to you in the last week or since we saw you that's been awesome? What's been awesome in your life? And we hear about grandkids, and we hear about the board member who's got a beaver pond in her backyard, and she can't stop watching the beavers. And you hear great stuff about people that has nothing to do. But what do we do in meetings? We want to get right down to business because we've got to get out of there. What we've done is we have traded effectiveness for efficiency. Efficiency is all about time, is all about scarcity. We've only got so much time. Let's get out of here. But the fact is that it is effective to get to know each other. And when things are going to bite us in the butt, it's going to be because we don't know each other. And because we don't know each other, we can't trust each other. And that's what happens when we suspect the worst in each other. The bottom line of the question, the assumption behind the question, who else cares about this, is people really care. And if we can tap into that, we tap into that with that question. The third question I'm going to share with you is also about the means that we use to do our work. And that question is, what resources do we have together that none of us has on our own? What resources do we have together that we don't have on our own? And again, when humanity has made these huge leaps forward, what we have found is that there is a core assumption that we have enough. And usually it's because we have enough together. We have enough together. It's like that old story of stone soup, where the traveler comes into town, and he knocks on every door, and he says, "Do you have some food?" And they say, "No, we don't have any food, we're poor." And he goes from door to door, and they say, "No, we don't have anything." He says, "Well, you know, if you're also poor, why don't we make a pot of stone soup?" I said, "Well, rocks we've got, so let's do that." So he says, "I'll need a pot. Does anybody have a pot?" "Well, of course, I got a pot." "We'll need some water." "Okay, well, we'll go to the well. And we need, how about some potatoes?" "Yeah, I've got some potatoes." "And we'll need some carrots." And by the time they're done, of course, we know how the story ends. They've got a big pot of broth. Why? Because what we have together, we don't have on our own. It's the power of what we call at Creating the Future, the power of collective enoughness. Collective enoughness. And that is simply the fact that together we have everything we need. It's only on our own that we experience scarcity. Together we have everything we need. It's only on our own that we experience scarcity. And you don't need me to tell you that that is not the assumption that most of us operate under. Most of the systems, most of whether it's government, business, nonprofit, we are taught you got to make it on your own, you got to sustain on your own, and especially in America where we are fiercely independent, we got to do it on our own. And scarcity is the reality. Enoughness is not the reality. We are taught scarcity is the reality. The opposite of worrying that somebody's going to steal my stuff is if we share our stuff. What resources do we have together that we don't have on our own? And what that comes down to is that we stop seeing money as a resource. Money is not a resource, or it is a placeholder for resources. We don't want money. We want the stuff that money buys us. We want people to help, people to pitch in. We want buildings, we want cars, we want the stuff that money buys us. When we think about money, we wind up in scarcity and all of those brain chemicals go. When we think about stuff, we realize the stuff is abundant, it's around us everywhere. One person may have some of it, together we have all of it. And the evidence about that is everywhere. I mean, there's the story about Amy's Foods. What they needed was they needed knowledge. It was out there. They didn't have to pay a high-priced consultant. They just picked up the phone and said, the evidence, the knowledge we need is out there. We see this in industry coalitions all the time. We share our stuff. We collectively buy health insurance. We collectively buy group buying and supplies. Chambers of commerce. We see this in the sharing economy. I mean, if you guys didn't have the light rail, I would have taken Uber or Lyft from the airport. I love Airbnb. We share what we've got because together we've got plenty. Together, we've got plenty. It's always been interesting to me that we have that philosophy when it comes to small business incubators. Can you imagine how cool it would be if we had big business incubators? I mean, we share all of this stuff. We come up with this abundance of stuff that we can all share because you're small and you're new. And then you're supposed to outgrow that and be a big boy and be on your own. Imagine the power if we had that collective sense, if we were large and powerful instead of small and struggling. We have enough if we share it. Mark mentioned that my partner and I founded the first diaper bank in the country, and we think probably in the world. And one of the things that we found is, again, we built it on a base of sharing resources. We asked in the community, who's got the stuff we need? We found that one of the agencies that were giving out the diapers, huge agency, and they had a volunteer manager and a volunteer management staff, and they told us, it is ridiculous for you to be scrounging for volunteers. You help us out with the diapers all the time. Call our volunteer manager when you need volunteers. Well, what do we normally hear? No, 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 if I share my volunteers, you'll steal them, right? No, just share them. We've got them. We got access to them. They love us. One of the other things that we found was that we needed people to transport diapers from schools who were collecting diapers to the warehouse, and that there were people running trucks around town all day long. Plumbing company was my personal favorite because the plumbing and the diapers thing was sort of interesting. But we had a plumbing company, we had a courier service. There are folks running around all the time. What do we have together that we don't have on our own? What we find is that, and again, this is the brain chemistry thing, when we feel we have enough, we can trust each other. We can't trust each other when we're in scarcity and being forced to compete with each other for scarce resources. When we feel we have enough, we can trust each other. We can begin to feel comfortable asking that question of who else cares about this? We can begin asking that question and feel comfortable that not only can we ask, what do we want life to be like, but we can actually work together to achieve that. So what it means for that whole issue of scarcity and the question of what resources do we have together that we don't have on our own, and the fact that together we have everything, it's only on our own that we face scarcity, means that when you are feeling scarcity in the work you're doing, it's because we haven't engaged enough people. And I don't mean rich people or investors or people with lots of money, just people. Because together we have everything we need, and it's only on our own that we experience that scarcity. Three simple, powerful questions. What do we want life to be like? Who else cares about this? And what resources do we have together that none of us have on our own? They create a cause and effect of assumptions that create different actions, that create different results. And what I wanted to know as we started to think about this is, okay, if this is where, if everything is cause and effect, where did those assumptions come from? Because if we've just laid out that these are pretty ineffective assumptions, that they're not serving our needs at all, where do they come from and why are we doing this? And so I figured, okay, I get my assumptions from my parents, where most of us got our assumptions from, and they got their assumptions from their parents, and they got their assumptions from their parents, and holy moly, you go back far enough. These assumptions come from a place 50 to 100,000 years ago when humans were brand new on this planet, when life was hard and scarce, and the best we could do was to react well to what was in front of us, because life was scary and we didn't understand anything. We were brand new babes. If I left my stuff out, you would steal it, because that was what life was like. And because we humans are storytelling machines, that's how we survive. We don't have big fangs, we're not stronger, we're not faster. But our survival is for me to tell my child, honey, this is how you survive. We handed this down from mother to daughter, from father to son, until all of us in this room have heard these stories, that life is hard, the best you can do is have the means to survive, things are scarce, we can't trust each other. This is a story that is somewhere between 50 and 100,000 years old. It served us really, really well back then, and it simply no longer serves us. It's time that we honor that story for what it did for us, because it got us here, and release it. We can continue to react to what is wrong with a war on drugs, or we can ask, what do we want life to be like, and what will it take to get there if we want life to be a healthy, humane, compassionate place? We can ask ourselves the reactive question and come up with a war on poverty, or we can say, what do we want our community to be like, and what would it take for us to be a place that is fair and equitable and thriving for everybody? We can continue to react with a war on terror, or we can ask, what do we want life on this planet to be like? And what would it take for this planet to be a place that is peaceful and loving and humane and economically equitable for everybody? We can continue to ask, when it comes to climate change, what is the problem, who is to blame, and how do we fix it, which is a great story, makes everybody feel terrific. Or we can ask, what do we want life on this planet to be like, and what would it take for us to get there? We can tether our actions to a story that's 50,000 years old, or we can open the door to a new story by the questions that we ask. And what you will find, it sets another assumption to rest. When we change the questions that we ask, change happens quickly, it happens dramatically, it happens joyfully. Change doesn't have to be hard and slow and incremental. It's another story we've told ourselves. And our fellows find this all the time, over and over and over again in the work that they do. What they have found is that just as we call it a self-fulfilling prophecy, when we think bad things will happen, and they do, a self-fulfilling prophecy is nothing but cause and effect. We've created that assumption, and we've made it true. So we can create different assumptions by the questions that we ask. And so I'm going to ask you guys one last question before I go, and that is, what do you think life could be like in Portland if each of you started asking these questions every day? And this one I will answer. I think it could be absolutely amazing. So thank you very much for the work that you guys all do.
Thank you, Hildy. That was a remarkable, oh, you need your water. A remarkable discussion, and one that I really enjoyed. And I want to think more myself about together we have everything we need. That's great. So we've come to the portion of our program where we invite members to come to the microphone to ask their questions. And if anyone in the audience has a question on an index card, please hold it up now, and a City Club staff member will come and collect it from you. Asking questions at Friday Forum microphone is a benefit of City Club membership, and membership is open to everyone. Before asking your question, please identify yourself as a City Club member. Please only ask one question, and if I flash this sign, it means please wrap up your question.
Hello, I have a question from Malia Thomas, a senior at Jefferson High School who's here as part of the Civic Scholars Program. Her question is, how do we bring out the best in high school students to prepare them for the real world?
Oh, God, that's beautiful. Because high school, you know, if we're talking about a place that's just nothing but rules and suspecting the worst in each other, yeah, high school. Junior high is actually worse. High school's just as bad, yeah. Well, the first thing that we can do is start demanding that, is start asking each other that. Change the questions that you're asking in the classroom. Reframe the questions your teachers are asking. One of the things that we've found is frequently we just habitually ask questions in the negative. What is the problem and how do we fix it? Or this is wrong. And we frequently have discussions in our classes, especially civics classes. This is what's wrong. How do we combat it? We can reframe that question and ask, okay, well, what would good look like? Okay, I get what's wrong. We've discussed that. Here's what's wrong. What would it look like if it were good? And start to have that discussion. And what you'll find is that the energy in the room goes up. Because the energy, when we talk about what's wrong, the energy just sucks, and we battle each other. And but you have that power. The interesting thing about questions, we call it leading from the middle at Creating the Future. Because what it is we all sense that we don't have power, that there's somebody above us that makes the rules. Our teachers make the rules. Our bosses make the rules. We all have the power to ask a question. And that is where your leadership power comes from, especially as students, because we want to encourage you to ask questions. So change the questions that you're asking in your day-to-day. Encourage your teachers to change the questions that they're asking. I hope that helped.
Greg McPherson, City Club member. In your remarks, you commented favorably about the tremendous success of the Apple company, and you also stated that sharing of information adds to our collective prosperity. And yet, Apple and other tech companies are famously guarded and secret about what they're working on. Do you think that Apple would be an even more successful company if it was sharing its current R&D projects?
Oh, if I had that crystal ball, man, I wouldn't tell you. I'd be investing in the stock market. No, I mean, what happens is we again see a Steve Jobs. Apple is not a thing. Apple is how many thousands of people sharing information on a day-to-day basis? I don't know if they'd be more successful or less successful if they open their doors, but I do know that industry people talk to each other, and tech people talk to each other. And they talk in tech clusters, they talk all the time. So we are all standing on the shoulders of giants. Apple didn't invent anything that they didn't also build on what came before them. So I don't know if they'd be more or less successful and if their stock prices would go up if they did. But I do know that, A, there is no monolith that is Apple. It is thousands of people contributing their brilliance, their ideas, and that we do stand on the shoulders of giants. We're building on people, on what we hear from others.
Ted Kay, City Club member, have you shared your ideas with people in other cultures, and if so, how have they been received, and if that's different from our culture?
A little bit. We are a brand new. You get me to shill for my organization, so thank you. We're a brand new organization. We're 4 years old as an organization. We are 2 years old as getting our tax status. So we are at the point now where we've put all the foundational pieces in place and are actually looking at the question of how do we scale this mission and ask that very big question. The first thing we're asking is who else cares about this? And over the next 2 years, looking to work with people around the world who also see what's possible and looking at very specifically the question that you're asking, Ted, which is coming from different cultures, what does it look like? How do we infuse a sense of what's possible? Because possible stuff happens everywhere. Humanity has, I mean, if you think about the time between that 50 to 100,000 years ago and now, we have made huge strides. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it, but we have been on a steady march towards progress since that day we first became humans. It's like there's something in our DNA. For every time we backslide, we move forward too. So for every inquisition, there's a renaissance. So that's a big part of our work over the next couple of years is actually to engage with people in different sectors, in different cultures, to say, okay, if we want to see systems change, how do we infuse that sense of what has happened in all cultures and just make it the norm?
There's a lot of what we've been through as a country in the last few years. It's been really hard on people individually, not just organizations, and your message has been pretty much addressed to how we can be more effective in groups or organizations. Do you have a version of that message that works one-on-one or for particular individuals who feel kind of stuck, or do you have some tools that have worked for you on bad days that get you back to creating the future's message during the day when you're having trouble getting started?
When I'm alone, life sucks. When I'm together with other people who make it better, it is just amazing the power we have together. The power we have together. And it is asking that question, what do I want life to be like? We can wallow for just so long, so for me personally. But we also know that people who have individually survived horrific circumstances see what's possible outside those circumstances. They're striving towards what's possible. So these questions, I meant it when I said these questions help regardless if you're CEO of a company or CEO of your family. Because these are questions that will just guide, they bring out the best in each of us. And that's the best that I can do, is that we are stronger together than we are alone. And we are stronger even, and that's why I separated means from ends. We are stronger even when we first ask that question, what do I want life to be like? Do I want to be alone and scarce, or do I want to be together with other people where we've got more? So, yeah. Hi.
My name is Sharon Joy. I am a City Club member. I have found that the kick in the rear helps too. In other words, we have a choice when the times get tough to go forward or backward, and sometimes that kick in the rear makes you go forward because you can't go backward. So my question is, I feel alone a lot, and I don't know who to ask. So my thing is to stay out of nursing homes, for example. I am also very interested in the prison system. I don't know who to ask. Is there anybody else out there that doesn't like nursing homes?
Is there anybody out here who does like nursing homes? Yeah. Well, and one of the things that we find, again, because our society really focuses on individuals, we don't create spaces for us to be together. It's not an uncommon question. I'm feeling alone and I don't know where to go and I don't know who to ask. And organizations that are there to bring people together frequently say, well, we've been here and we're doing outreach. How come they don't? Because we've segregated people and we make them feel alone. Where I always suggest people start is with who they know. Because we all know somebody, and we just start asking the question, who do we know, who do I know that is working, that either also doesn't want to be in a nursing home, or is working with nursing homes, or is doing the kind of, I have this thing, it's making me crazy. Who do you know? And we start looking, we talk about ripples in the pond. Just who are those first ripples? Who are the people we know? And who do they know? And who do they know? And it really is just a matter of, we're all taught, again, you know, I'm just me. I don't know powerful people. I don't know wealthy people. I can't do anything. And the reality is we already know everybody we need to know. Just start just talking with the people that we already know and asking the question, is there anybody else who cares about this? Who else cares about this?
Kurt Wavering, member. First of all, I rather like your questions and the positiveness of it, but I'm going to ask a slightly different question of you, which is, how do we deal with our past histories that have such devastating events in them? And I'll mention a few. One is the Civil War. You know, 500,000 people died. The other is the Holocaust, of course. And Europe is filled with memorials, concentration camps, which are still there and held to remind us. So how do we deal, in your perspective, with learning from the devastating things that have happened in our history?
The things that we can learn the most, I think, from, and I'm really glad you asked that, from the devastating things that happened, is that we continue to think of them as horrible things, and the things we honor are the people who made it possible to come out of that. And in my perspective, and it's just a personal perspective, the best thing we can do to honor our past pain is to ask what it would look like if nobody ever has to suffer that pain again. And that's the question of, what do we want life to be like? It doesn't mean we forget what happened to us, because we can't forget. We're all human. We all have the stuff that has happened in our individual lives and in our history. But if the thing we learn from it is people are always going to suck and you better look out, then I guarantee the next thing that happens is going to reflect that. And so if what we learn from it is that we can do better and historically have, and that every time we go through something bad, something good comes out of it eventually. We have a European Union now where we used to have warring nation states. We also have a Germany that is being encouraged right now to take a larger role as the peacekeeper. So we have that potential in us at all times, and if we can't get past just focusing on what's wrong, that's the suspecting it's always going to be like that. Those people are horrible and they'll always be like that, and that separates us. That allows us to feel superior. It's that question that I asked early on, is who's better? And it lets us feel like we're better because we're better people. We're the ones who suffered. And if the next thing out of that is, yes, we suffered, and we can do better, and we can be better, then that's what reaches for what's possible. We honor it, and we release it, and we move into what's possible. Otherwise, we just get stuck in that horrible place.
We have run out of broadcast time, and we'll have to stop for the day. But as we close, please join me in offering our sincere thanks to Hildy Gottlieb, as well as Mark Stevenson and the Willamette Valley Development Officers. Thank you.